Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm visible and audible.
Yes.
Yeah, I just don't see myself in the screen. Never mind. Yes, I am an assistant professor at Leiden University, and in the last 2, 3 years, I've worked on this project called Impact Lab, together with a few others. So, like Henk was saying, first I want to present a bit about it so that you all we're all on the same page of what Impact Lab is and what it can do, and then we'll have a lot of time for questions. And actually, I also like it when a person can like orally ask their question instead of in the chat, because then it feels a bit more like we're all here as humans instead of as robots. So feel free to also just raise your hand so you can ask your question by talking. Now I just have to share my screen, and that will happen now, hopefully. Present, and then trying to get you back. Okay, I guess it's on here. Yes. So, like I said, we established the Impact Lab around 2 years ago, and I was asked by the Dutch, the funding agency, that also have a part that's called the National Research Agenda. They also do a lot of, or they support and do a lot of outreach or science communication. So they asked us to help them make something that we could measure the impact of science communication. And they started with, can you make one survey that we can send to all different projects? Of course, that's impossible, and I'll tell you why as well. But they asked me, together with Madeleine Strik, who's at Utrecht University, to I guess, make this work. And we worked together with Bart Peters and Patty de Jong, who are two of the people that actually worked on this project for these 2 years. Unfortunately, now we've sort of paused it because the funding was done, but we're hoping to get a future for the Impact Lab work in, I don't know, a couple of years. So what we did is, on one side, we developed tools to measure the impact of science communication in different kinds of situations and for different kinds of projects. And also, very soon, we figured out that people needed some support for that. So one of the things, or three of the things we made, was a platform, so a website, and hopefully some of you have looked into that. That has all our tools on it. So we have a toolbox that has different kinds of methods to measure the impact of science communication, and also a sort of a decision tree that helps you go through a few choices you have to make in order to get to the suitable tools. We also have a ready-made question bank with, just if you don't have any time to develop something yourself, there's this question list, and that is in the form of a survey that you can send out or can use in your projects quite easily. And then on the other side of the project, we also did some research, and we would like to continue that as well. So we looked at, can we tease out sort of the active ingredients of science communication? So what makes a science communication project, product, format successful for different target audiences? And we try to do that by working with over 100 science communication projects. Only a few of them actually got their data to us, but if everyone is asking similar questions, we can compare that and then try to find what works and what doesn't work in certain situations. So that's the research part of this Impact Lab work. So why should you measure impact? We think it's really important in the whole cycle of developing and managing projects, or science communication in this case. So impact is a word that you hear everywhere, also the impact of research itself, but we're really focused on the impact of science communication. So we see that you have a mission, you have a goal, and it's very important that you have clear goals. You plan what you want to do and how you want to measure it. Then you collect your data, you learn from it, so you analyze and interpret the results, and that makes you maybe tweak things in your project or do something different next time. So this is really focused on developing and growing as one person or one project, instead of the big thing of collecting all this data together. But this is really, if you're by yourself, you're doing something science communication, how can you then use evaluation or measuring impact to improve, and how can you make it part of this whole cycle of developing and performing science communication? So it's a continuous project and it should be part of that development process. So then what is impact? Like I said, it's a word that's being used a lot, and it's really often in this framework, which they call a logic model. So you have output, you have outcomes, and then you have impact. So usually output is really observable achievements or advances or products. So the things you make, the visitor clicks, the audience that you reach. So really what came out of your project as sort of things. And then outcomes are the results you want to, or that you had or have with the target group, or the people that interacted with your product, that read your blog, that came to your festival. So you're looking at the things that happened for them, for the people that are actually part of your target group. So those can be effects on their knowledge, their attitude, or their behavior. And then the next step is impact, where it's really about sustainable changes and effects in the entire society. So it's a larger thing that you can almost never influence with just this one thing that you're doing. So if you have a festival where people are there for 2 hours or 3 hours, you cannot really change something in society, but it is, you want to contribute to that larger impact. So those can be combined and contextualized effects and things that happen in a larger group of people or in a larger environment. So it's not that you can be a piece of the puzzle, I like to say, but it's really hard to measure the impact of your, like the real impact of your own efforts. So when you develop a measurement plan or an evaluation plan, we always say that you should focus on these outputs. So what have you made? Who have you reached? And then the outcomes. What has it done with your visiting or interacting audiences? And then you can make use of these, the question bank, the decision tree, and the toolbox. So I'll quickly run through the three of these things. So our question bank, like I said, is really something we developed that is ready to use. We have a version for adults and a version for children, because soon we found that we should not use the same questions for both groups. So one part of the question bank are demographics, to see who you reached and what range you like, age range, for example. Then we have a few questions about science capital, which means measuring what people's experiences are with science and how much they already know, how they already think about science. So it helps you to see who you reached. So it can be that with a certain festival, for example, that was organized in the university, we reached people with a high science capital, because these were people that already knew about science. Their parents probably worked at the university. But if you really want to do something in terms of science communication for a different group, then it's important to measure if you actually reach them. So it's about what they know about science, how they think about science, but also what they already do and who they know. Do they have scientists in their surrounding or in their community? A third part of this question bank is really overall effects. So we have a question about, did they learn something? A question about, did they change their attitudes? And a question about, did they change their behavior? And then the fourth one is emotional memory, because we, from literature and from other research, it turns out that the emotion that people feel during these events or during an interaction with a science communication project also helps you identify if they learned and how they learned and if they remember something. And there are two elements in this. One of them is pleasure, and one of them is how intense they experience this emotion. So that's the question bank. And then we have the toolbox and the decision tree. So just to run through it, first we want you to decide what goals and objectives are most important for your project, and which are you most interested in. So often these science communication projects have really different goals. You want people to learn something, but you also want them to be more excited and to change their behavior. And for measuring impact, it's really important to pick one and focus on that one to make it strong. The next question you have to ask yourself is, what type of data do you want to collect? Do you want to use data that's already there, like clicks or views? or do you want to get new data from your participants? And also, which target group do you focus on? It also makes a difference for the type of measurement that you can do. Then another choice you have to make is, how do you want your audience to participate, and how many people do you have? So with a group of 100 plus people, of course, it's really hard to do interviews. And then that will help you decide between a whole range of different types of instruments. So we made them in 10 categories. Here you see, you don't have to remember this, but just to show you, we have focus group interviews, but also creative techniques or data analysis or surveys or voting or observation. So these are 10 different types of instruments. And then on the website, we show you how to use these different instruments and to make them fit your own science communication event or product. So I think, yeah, that's what I just wanted to tell you in a nutshell. Let me stop the share. And then I guess the floor is open for questions. So raise your hand or put something in the chat. Either way is fine by me. And I don't know if it's possible that people like put their cameras on so we can sort of see each other. If you like, I see a question by Esther de Smet. Go ahead.
Yes, I don't know whether I'm visible. I don't see myself. So
yeah, we see you.
Thank you, Anne, for that. I don't see myself, so yeah, I hope I don't do anything stupid. I have a question that maybe goes back to the origin story of Impact Lab. And that's, I've been in touch with Alex Verkade a long time ago, who already developed some type of guideline on how to evaluate science communication. So I think it was in his affiliation with the Rathenau Institute. So I was wondering how you worked with that, and maybe tied to that, because if Alex's name is known, how do you now cooperate or collaborate with that new institute or that national contact center that has been developed within the Netherlands for science communication?
Yes, thanks for this question. So Alex, we knew about his what he calls beoordelingsinstrument, so evaluation instrument. And he was in the sort of the supervisory board of this project. So we collaborated very closely with him. And really what his instrument was about was assessing someone's science communication plans. So it was focused on, if you write something in a proposal about science communication, often it's like, yes, we'll make a podcast. And then no real, I guess, thinking behind it. So this instrument from Alex was really about, okay, think before you do science communication. So it has all these criteria on was the target audience involved? Is there an evaluation plan and things like that? So we sort of built upon that. Because then if you evaluate someone's plans, how do you then evaluate the actual outcomes and what happened with the audience, and did they learn something? The goals that you have, are they actually reached? So it's really complementary. And then your second question, how does this fit with the National Center? For people who may not have seen that initiative, in the Netherlands, the Minister of Education gave the assignment to actually my colleague and Alex, the one Esther mentioned, to write an advisory report about starting a National Center for Science Communication, which is now called the National Expertise Center for Science and Society. And in their report, it has a part about evaluation is very important. So hopefully, at least the support part of our Impact Lab work could maybe possibly get a spot in that national center, or at least there will be collaboration. I guess not so nice thing of this project of 2 years is we developed this, we see a lot of enthusiasm, but now we barely have the time to do any support and any, like, I do this, but I could do this like twice a week, every week, with the questions that we get. So we see that there's a need. So hopefully that need is also valued and maybe part of the National Center. But of course, we have to wait until they've developed themselves a bit further.
Yeah, that was kind of the background to my question. I was wondering about your own impact plan.
Yeah.
Okay, no, thank
Yeah,
you.
so it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit how it works with these kinds of plans, right? You get some money for just a few years, and you have to make do and hopefully find a future for your project. So we are working on that for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I see a few questions in the chat. So someone has a really easy question. The person is Alex Verkade, and he's now, I'll type it in the chat. He's now somewhere else, but if you Google him, you can find his contact information. And Ava says, can you suggest means to measure effective written science communication and popular scientific articles, or any other where a scientist has no direct connection with their audience? That's a really good question. We get the question a lot, and sort of by coincidence, we worked in these 2 years, we worked a lot with events. So where you can more easily interact with your audience. They are there, so they're also, I guess, easier to reach for any impact measurement, especially if you're looking at interviews or focus groups or observations. But there are many of the tools we provide are also possible in written or other formats. So especially if they're online, it's often easy to look at these output kind of measures. So how many people have viewed them? How often has it been shared on social media? What are people saying about it? So you could do sort of like a content analysis, or either just measure the numbers, which is easier, but you could also look at the content of comments, for example. So if your video is on YouTube, often there's a comment section, so you could look into what's being said. And sometimes these things are, there's no, I guess, no real content in them, but often there is something. Or you could even ask this, right? So in your video or at the end of your video, please let us know what other questions you have or something like that. So there are ways to become a bit creative. And I guess if things are live, sometimes you could do like these sort of quizzes or a Mentimeter type thing, or ask people for their immediate input, and that will help you understand maybe what they understood about it or how they think about a certain topic. You see with, I guess, like popular science magazines, they sometimes do a readers survey. So they send out a survey to anyone who's ever logged in on their site, and they ask them questions. So these things are possible as well. Let me see. Yeah, so I think that's the answer to that question. And let's see, then I see a question by Ben Buring. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks a lot. I have a question that maybe taps in your experience of working with your toolbox and all your things. Do you know, or can you tell me if it is more researchers themselves using that, or is it the institution who is basically providing that impact analysis? And me myself being the institution, advising people on what to do, what's the best tools for your research to communicate it, and then often getting the answer, well, we love the evaluation, but we hardly have time to do the communication first. So
Yeah.
We can't do the evaluation. And we then, being the guys at the center of the university who basically help everybody, don't have the time to do either.
Yeah.
So who's using it most?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have actual numbers of who's using it most, but the projects that we worked with, some of them, they got funding as projects that always had to be organized by a scientist or by a group of scientists. So then the scientists were using it themselves. But we've also done a lot of workshops with groups of more of the support staff, like you're saying, or the people that are supporting public engagement or science communication. So I think both groups are using them. Our point is often that to do it well, you have to really think about it. So it seems harder than you think. It's not just asking them a question. But then at the other side, you can also make it very easy and very simple, and will give you information pretty quickly and very interesting, even though it's not like a full-on survey where you have to collect email addresses and you have to do all these Excel or R statistical analyses. So we also try to show ways that you can make it very easy so that the scientist just incorporates it in their project anyway. So we have a collaboration actually with Sharon Unsworth at Nijmegen, Radboud University in Nijmegen. And she organizes a festival about language, language studies in the libraries of the city for groups that normally don't get in touch with science or with research. And then they have this station in their event or in the library where kids just I think they put a ping pong ball in one of the boxes that says, I learned something, or I didn't learn something, or I learned, like something like that, right? Sort of these questions that you could also put on a survey. So kids just put their balls in boxes, and then at the end of the day, they can see how many balls were in this and how many balls were in this box. So it's a pretty easy way. It gives you some information. It's not that hard to do or to analyze. So that may be possible for individual scientists, but we also work, for example, with someone at Utrecht University who is in the public engagement office. And what she is doing, she has been sort of part of our target audience from the beginning, was part of our first masterclass. And now she is giving workshops like ours to people within her own university. So that's really a format or a way to work that we like, that where we train one person and that person can train within the university. So then there's maybe a collaboration between some of it you do, because the scientist really doesn't have any time, but maybe you also give a workshop for people who feel like they could, but maybe need a little bit of help the first time, but then after that they can do it themselves. So sort of finding a balance.
If I may, just a follow up on that, do you think have you thought about collecting the results of these dispersed individual impacts analysis and basically make a data collection of it, although it will be hard to use maybe?
So that's the research part of our project the last couple of years. So we used our question bank, so the 4 types of questions, and we tried to make as many of the projects that we collaborated with ask them to use that and to send us their data. So then our service was, because we had the manpower to give them an analysis report, but then we also had their data and we combined that with, so now we have, at the end of our project, we had 6 different projects that used our question bank, and then we combined all that data for a validation. So does this survey do what it needs to do? The answer was yes. And then also to see what learnings we could draw from comparing all these different projects. And we're in the process, we are trying to get a paper out of this so that we can share this information. We also have it in our final report, but that's only in Dutch, unfortunately.
I'll try. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Let's see, we also got an email yesterday from, I think, or were these, those are maybe the same questions. I see it's the same person, Ave. Was there any question on your email that, I see there's a different question. So one of your questions also was, in the material for adults, we ask for consent for the survey. And then there are many questions that you have to answer with just only one yes and one no. So it's really a informed consent, and that's something you need if you're asking people for their data. So they need to know that you're collecting the data, that you're keeping it safe, that it's voluntary, and a few other things. So in some of these consent forms, they're really long, they have a lot of language, and then you have to click yes on every single thing. But we wanted, for this thing, we wanted it to make it a bit more simple. So we just say all of these things, just let us know that you agree with it. So then it's the yes. And then if there's one of the things that is not true for you, then you should click no. And then you're sent to, I guess, the end of the survey as saying, thank you for at least trying. Unfortunately, we cannot let you go on with the survey, something like that. So you're right that if you look at it very tenaciously, you see you ask 4 questions with 1 answer, and that's of course impossible. But what we ask is you need all these 4 things, and if you agree with all these 4 things, then you can do the survey. If not, then you don't do the survey. So that's why we collected it in 1 question. And then another question of the same person was that all these methods and tools are for like more of events. And then you're also asking about publication, like scientific publications, and how do you measure impact of that? Like I said in the beginning, we're focused mostly on science communication towards like a general audience. So of course, scientific publications are for a different audience, for scientists, but you could still look at many journals now also collect alt metrics. So you see how many people shared your article or how many people talked about it on Twitter. So you could look into that to see, or you could look into your citations if people cite it and see how they're using it. So are they just using you for an example, or are they actually using part of your theory or part of your results? And then you can see a bit what kind of impact your research had on your field. And are they inside your own field, or are they transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary? Those are things that you could look into. All right, let's see. Gloria?
Yes, hi, hello. I'm Gloria, and we are working on impact-related work packages on, indeed, the context of Enlight, together with Ster as well, who is attending this meeting. I have a specific. I had 2 questions. Partially, you answered part of it already. If these toolbox and instruments that you are providing can be used for other type of research activities, not only science communication, first question. And the second question, I've been navigating a little bit through it, and I have the feeling this is, you are assessing the impact on specific stakeholders, on specific groups. But what about more institutional impact, other types of effects and impacts that can have on society, on specific challenges? How are you capturing that through these tools? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Yes. So now I already forgot your first question. Can you give me 1 keyword again?
Yeah, the impact of other related research activities, not only science communication.
Yeah. So we really focused on science communication because it's so broad otherwise, and impact is a word, like I said, you see everywhere. So that's really our focus and also our assignment. But of course, some of the ideas and some of the instruments even you could tweak to look at other impacts as well. I think institutional impact, so we always try to make it as close to what you're actually doing as possible, because that's what you can reach, right? So you can, if you say, okay, we're doing all these science communication projects, how is that changing our university, for example? It's really hard to measure and also to make the connection that it's all because of your efforts, because society is changing as well. What other universities is doing is changing as well. So you can look at how the university changed, but you can never be sure that it's only because of your efforts. But what you can do is maybe everyone you've interacted with over a year time span, for example, you can ask them after a year, like, hey, you whatever, you came to our workshop, what did you do after that? Or we helped you with this science communication. Am I still visible? Yeah. We helped you with this science communication event. What was your opinion? How did it change your ideas? How did you change thinking? How did it change your thinking about science communication in the future, or things like that, right? So you could do something with the people that you actually interacted with, which is easier. And then it's also easier to sort of prove that it's because of your efforts. And then apart from that, you can look at what's happening university-wide, but then it's, like I said, it's hard to draw the conclusion that it's all because of your efforts. So we always try to, of course, we're always thinking big. So it may be that your motivation for this work is really because you want to change the university or even the academic field. but what you're doing is mostly interacting with like the people closer by. So you're working towards that, and it's the goal that you have, like the impact goal that you have for the future, but what you're doing is impacting a closer, like a more closer group, so to say. Does that make sense? And you did have a question before this one, and I forgot, like at the beginning of your...
Yeah, it was. So the last question was about the effects on systems, on society, and all these, and you correctly answered. It's the linkage between attribution and contribution to. So we can attribute something, but the contribution, it's harder to prove. So this is the last question. The first one was, you are focusing on the impact of science communication related activities, if the tools that you are providing us are also helpful and could be explored for assessing the impact of other research or either higher education activities.
Yeah, and I think, of course, if you think of teaching, you could use some of these instruments as well, right? It's really good to think about teaching in terms of having a goal, trying to reach it, and checking if your goal is there. And the same for interaction with whatever policymakers or other stakeholders or businesses. And even, and we've been asked as well, like sometimes you want to know what doing outreach has done to your researchers. So you're not looking at the audience, but you're looking at the performers, so to say. And then you could do similar things, right? You're asking slightly different questions, but you could still choose, is this something I want to do with a survey? Do I just want to observe them? Do I want to do an interview? So you could still use the same thoughts about measuring impact. All right, I saw a comment as well from Henk, and I think it's a good addition to the question of where does the manpower come from? So many universities have departments of science education, science communication, science and society, maybe even cognitive psychology or things like that. And these students have to learn how to do evaluations, research, use research methods, get their hands dirty on this. And I am also working in such a department. We are always looking for internship opportunities or assignments for our students. So they could help you there as well. They have then the time to go to the event or to send out a survey, analyze the results. So if you can hook up with departments and study programs in your university or in a close by university or school, then that may help as well to get the work done. I guess, yeah, any other questions or things I overlooked in the chat? Or maybe someone has experience with trying or doing evaluations and wants to share things that worked well or things that were not so successful. Belen, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, well, it's not like it's an issue that I have sometimes felt. Like when you get surveys or any other kind of responses on any type from your public or your audience, many times when you go for this awareness or emotional memory, you call it before, all these kind of subjective items, it's very difficult to really know if they are saying the truth or not. So everyone that is attending a scientific communication program or project or whatever is going to say that is super worried about climate change or whatever the topic is about. But at the end, it's not really, to how extent is that true and is that transformed into an action or into a real effect? So how do you deal with that kind of bias or?
Yeah, it's a really good question and something I guess every social scientist is struggling with because you need some information. It's better than nothing, but you can never get to the real truth because it's something that happens in people's minds or something that happens after, right? So if you're thinking of behavior change, so you have to be a bit clever about it and also just accept that sometimes it is what it is. So I also we figured out that if people feel like they've learned something at an event or from a podcast, that may also be like an added value, right? Even if you start measuring, like if you ask them questions, they don't answer the questions correctly. So the things that you think they should learn, they haven't learned. But if they feel like this was educational, that could be an outcome as well that's positive. So that's one thing to look at it. But then also for attitudes, what sometimes helps is to ask these questions both ways. So you have these statements, I now feel a lot more positive about science. But you can also reverse them and do something like, well, science is not worth the money or something like that, right? So have negative and positives. That sometimes helps people to not just say, okay, I'm very positive and I'll do the 5s, but really think about their thoughts. So that helps a bit. And in terms of behavior change, if you have the time, it could help to go back to people at times after and then say, okay, at this event, everyone's so excited. We saw that many people wanted to try and change their behavior in terms of sustainability or whatever. And now we really would like to know what you've done. So what in the last 2 weeks have you done differently after this event? And of course, it takes more time. But even if you have whatever, like 100 people on your survey and you ask 10 or 20 people about their actual behavior, you get a bit of a feel for, okay, they all say it, but almost no one does it. So there's a discrepancy there. And yeah, see the behavior change as something that needs different steps, right? It's not just 1 hour of like, or whatever, a 30-minute podcast, and then all of a sudden their behavior is completely changed. But maybe after this podcast, they are a bit more positive about their own efficacy of changing their behavior. And then it's one piece of the puzzle towards changing their behavior. So yeah, there's no one solution. There are different things you could do to tweak it a bit. It can also help to if you do a survey or a large group of people that answer it in a certain way, and then also ask a few people a few follow-up questions, like in an interview style, to really get to understand if they answer this, what do they really mean? And then you also get a better idea of what these more number-like answers mean in reality. Does that help a bit? It's always a struggle.
Yeah, it is. Again, thanks a lot.
Yes. Esther?
Yes, I'll just keep asking questions if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got 2 questions. On the one hand, in Flanders, every Flemish university has a science communication unit. It's almost mandated from the government, and they sign this sort of agreement with the government what their main mission is. Yeah, you might say that that's very good, but one of their main missions is actually STEM, so promoting STEM education. And so I was wondering whether you see some sort of, is your toolkit, are your resources wide enough? You don't have this kind of political pressure to focus mainly on science communication in order to be a PR machine for STEM. So that's one question. The other one, I think, matches a little bit with what Gloria was asking. How do you see it yourself within the Dutch landscape developing? Is science communication kind of the easy pathway to research impact that everyone is now focusing on? Is there a lot of energy going towards science communication? Is it embedded enough in a broader approach to impact? Are there other pathways to impact besides science communication, which is of course something that runs throughout every type of impact pathway? Is there room for the other pathways as well, according to you?
And can you give an example of what other pathways are you then referring to?
Citizen science. Maybe the question is rather, what's the definition of science communication in your case? Because in our case, this is only a small portion of the pathways to impact. You might have things like policy advice. We don't usually define that as science communication. So science communication would be things like children's university, science cafes, the almost traditional forms of science festival, things like that. So the events which are mostly organized and coordinated by these units for science communication at the universities. And then we've all these other things like participatory research, I don't know, tech transfer, pathways to impact that are different from communication.
Yeah, clear. So to start with your first question about focus on STEM, I think we're working on it. So in the Netherlands, many of the communication departments, and it differs very much per university, but even within universities per faculty, or even within like per a research institute, how they see their role as the communication department. So some of them are really focused on the both things, so finding new students, but also their sort of societal role of sharing their knowledge and listening to the audience, so a more general public. But others really see it as as a PR role. So I've also discussed like doing something for primary school students, but then they didn't want the students that because in the Netherlands we have these tracks in high school, so you have different types of high school, and one track is really preparing you for university. So they didn't want to do anything with these other tracks or kids who may end up in these other tracks, because those will never be our students. So why are we putting effort in them? So I was really astonished by that thought process, but it's still there. I think we're working on getting science communication, and with that I mean the whole range of public engagement, from citizen science until like more the sending stuff like a podcast or whatever. So really engaging with the general audience. So if I say science communication, and I know the word has different meanings for different people, but for us it's really the broad thing where there's interaction in one way or another between science and society. So that's actually why the new national center is called Science and Society and not Science Communication, because of this confusion.
So it would also involve things like creating training materials, things like that. So that what we might call research communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still mostly towards a general audience. So
Yeah.
I think the policy
engagement
is something different. Or so it's mostly like societal partners or a general audience.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of the focus that it gets in the whole impact pathway thinking, it's not that well established, and that's like the National Center will hopefully make sure that there's more weight given to the science communication or the public engagement. Often, like I was saying, if you have this huge consortium proposal where you spend a lot of money on science, and then you also, everyone has the requirement to also add public engagement or outreach or whatever you want to call it in their proposal. But my feeling is that it's not taken as serious as the research part, right? So it's often something that is sort of ticked off by the scientists who are writing the proposal, but it feels like that also from the part of the funding agency that is, or the referees that are looking at the proposal. I've been in a few, and often there's no question about the science communication. In the interview stage, there's nothing about the science communication part. They don't look at, is the science communication actually developed in a clever way? Is a podcast or a video or a website actually the right way to reach the goal that you have? So we have a long way to go, I think, but there are like signs that it's getting better.
Mm-hmm. But you now have separate funding, right, from NWO for kind of engagement activities. Do they make use of some sort of assessment framework that you were involved in? Or
yes, so they so this specific call system for science communication projects does use the instrument of Alex Verkade that we just discussed. And so then there is there, of course, there's the focus on science communication. There it's done in that way.
And do they follow up with using your framework then to do
that was our aim.
Afterwards?
So we reached out to all these projects to say we have this evaluation framework, and hopefully in the future there will also, from the funding agency, hopefully there will be also some requirement or suggestion to also use this to evaluate, and hopefully even to say, okay, you need to evaluate your project. Here are some tools that you can use, but you need to evaluate anyway. Otherwise, whatever. I don't know how they do it, but so there's changes, and I'm very happy to see them. But I think there's still a long way to go, also in the realization of people of how important this part in these projects.
Yeah, we're all in the same boat. So keep going. Yeah. You're doing great work. Thank you.
Well, and it's nice to look at neighboring countries, right? So to see, hey, here they're doing this, and somewhere else they're doing something else. Yeah, really well. So yeah. Hank, you want to add something or ask?
Yeah, so I'm in the jury for this national call for science communication. So if proposals have thought about their evaluation, they're also more clear about their targets, their objectives, and about the feasibility. And if they can indicate that they'll use certain methods from the impact lab, then of course that makes clear to us that they've thought about this, and it will raise their chances of getting funded. Because so many projects have not thought about why the audience would be interested, or even who their audiences is. So, and also, I mean, the jury for the seed funding from our university, and more than half of the project proposals were not eligible because they hadn't delineated their target audience. They didn't know what they want, what impact they wanted to create. So I think these tools are very handy also when you're still writing your proposals or planning your work. And you can even use them maybe to do format or pre-tests, like what does the audience already know? What would they be interested in before you start recording an expensive podcast or whatever? So are there any potential listeners for it?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And it's something that we realized, or we found out, like in the beginning of this project, when we were doing our first masterclass and workshops. We started where, okay, you have this plan, and now you're going to do your evaluation. But then we asked them, what's the goal of your plan, of your science communication? And people were like, I don't know. So we found out that forcing them, or like thinking with them about their evaluation, made them think back. So we even had people that changed their project slightly or completely during our workshops, because they were like, yeah, I wanted to reach this goal with this audience, but it doesn't match with my format. So, and of course, our project was not aimed at that stage, but we did incorporate it, of course. But I think it's good to look at the Wissenschaft im Dialog. That's a German institution. I'll put something in the chat. And they have impact units, and there they have a lot of manpower, and it still exists. So they're developing a lot of things, and also some automatic, like sort of a dashboard where you can get a survey and also get the analysis. And they do start with the, sorry, I'm trying to type as well. With that stage of thinking about your goals before you start working on developing your science communication. Any other questions, remarks, experiences?
Well, if there aren't any more, then I would like to thank Anne quite a lot for volunteering to do this, because the project has ended already, and still you want to talk about it.
I make exceptions.
Thank you. In the chat, I put a link to like an evaluation forms for us as organizers of this webinar series. I would be grateful if you take the small trouble of answering 5 short questions. So it's our evaluation of our communication tool. I have to admit it's not based on Impact Lab, but we just thought of a few questions that would be helpful for us in planning these types of series. So Anne, thanks a lot, and thanks to everybody that took their time out of lunch to come to this session. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you again in any other occasion. So thanks, and good luck with all the support you're now going to give to other researchers doing the impact evaluation of their projects. So thank you, and goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.